Let's just get started. I always like to define words. I feel like it's a really good tone setter as well. So when it comes to what is a strategy, there's two definitions. The second one I think really hit. The first one's just kind of generic. So a strategy is a plan of action or a policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. Now, in general, that's like a lot of words for just saying a plan on how you're going to accomplish something. And like if we're putting it simply, that's all a strategy is. When we word it so simply, we can start to be generic in how we approach it. So I really like how it also defined it as the art of planning or directing overall military operations and movements in a war or battle. Like that really brings it to the next level when you think about a strategy, military operations, like they don't play. One day I'm going to have to get someone who's from that community who can talk about maybe the alignment between creating a strategy in that sense and how it is creating a strategy in business development, or in this case, ERG program development. But by us taking our ERG program more seriously, we're going to have that same level of granularity when it comes to how tactical we're being. We're going to be more meticulous, just like in a war, in a battle, lives are at stake. Like you take that very seriously. And it sounds dramatic, but really we are impacting lives with this ERG program work. I know me personally, I would not be where I am if it wasn't for ERG programs. Not only has my career changed, but my life has changed. I've changed my family's lives by what I have access to now that I've been in this work. So can you imagine if your program was able to do that at scale, where people who touch or interact with your ERG program, their lives are able to change. They're able to point to you and say, wow, you really helped to bring this to life. There are lives at stake here, just like with a military operation. That's why I'm taking it so seriously. And that's why we all have to get to this next level of, oh, okay, how am I going to be this granular? And no, a strategy is part of one of those things that's going to help you attack this in a more strategic way. And as an ERG program manager in particular, you have a responsibility to be that tactical in how you approach it. So in order to have a strategy, what do you need to start with? Thing one that a lot of people are missing is a vision. So I'll use this illustration. Running an ERG program is like flying a plane over the ocean, right? So your vision in this case would be your destination. That is where you are trying to go. Now, if you're flying a plane over the ocean, how is that going to go if you don't know where the end goal is? Like, what are the possibilities? Like you're guaranteed to run out of gas over the ocean, or you're just gonna land somewhere random. All this illustration to say, if you don't have a destination, you're literally just flying with no end goal. And unfortunately, that's what's happening a lot in the ERG space. It has not been painted very clearly on where we're trying to go. What is the point where our ERG program is successful, right? If we don't have that, then we can't build a strategy to help us to reach that point. I used to talk about visions a little bit differently, really coming from an ERG leader perspective. I used to say once upon a time that every single ERG should have its own vision and mission statement. I do not say that anymore. And just know the things that I talk about in the ERG Movement Podcast is because I've made these same mistakes. And I just want you all to be able to go right past them. Learn from my mistakes. You don't have to do it the hard way. So that being said, I no longer say that. As an ERG program, if you're flying a plane over the ocean, once again, you have these different people in the plane. Everyone can't want to go to a different destination in the same plane. It's not that type of situation. Then you're essentially like splitting the plane off into pieces, which obviously that ends in disaster. As an ERG program, you all have to be going towards the same goal, same end destination. This individualized ERG approach cannot be a thing. Now, granted, within that, that's where mission statements come in, where each ERG is specifically, they're going towards this big overall program vision. This is how we want to impact the company unitedly as a program, but then specifically for the niche communities that make up the ERG program. How do you want to impact your community? That's the mission statement. Actually, maybe that'll be next week's, because I had something for next week, but I think mission statements are a conversation that we need to have, and how we can actually make them impactful. Nevertheless, the vision piece, though, that is, once again, program level approach. yeah, I kind of already covered all that. So if you have a goal, you can now map out how to reach that goal. That's the vision piece. And if you heard earlier about the program foundation and what makes that up, before you create your vision, you have to hear from people what they want. So not only do you want to make sure that you have a destination, but you want to make sure it's the right destination. Maybe you got your ERG program to like where you wanted it to be, but if it's not in alignment with what the members of these underrepresented communities want, if it's not in alignment with what the executives want, especially, and what the business wants, that's the wrong destination. You've just wasted all of that time. So even before you go to crafting your vision, outlining what success means for your ERG program, you also just have to hear what people want out of an ERG program. Take notes, make it quantifiable. That's why I really recommend asking consistent questions. This way, it's not just, oh, here's some quote pieces of feedback here and there, but now you can put it into charts and say, I asked this question and 95 of the people who responded of the executives said that they wanted business impact. Like that's really a priority for them. So now I'm not going to focus majority of the ERG program strategy on like our end goal being just community impact. Like at the end, we're going to meet these expectations. Hopefully you all like follow what I'm saying here. So you have to get the feedback. This way you craft the vision, you're crafting that destination, right? Okay. So now that we have a destination, we can outline how we're going to get there. That is the strategy piece. Which one do I want to cover first? So there's the components of a strategy. And then there's also, you know what, we're going to go with that. So the benefits of having a strategy, people trust people with this strategy. If we're putting it very simply, just think about you as the pilot of this plane that's flying over the ocean. You have a lot more faith in a pilot who knows his route, she, there, who knows their route. You get what I'm trying to say, especially in Women's History Month. That was egregious. So you definitely trust a pilot who knows their route in advance. That's what's going to happen. And the same thing applies with ERG leaders. They have trust in someone who has a plan on, okay, this is where we're trying to get to, and this is how we're going to accomplish it. This is how we get to point A to point B, and here's a whole bunch of context on how we're going to get there. People want to know that you're not just going to fly them around in circles, wasting their time. I say, and I'm almost saying the same thing, repeating it, but in a sense, this is what's happening with a lot of ERG programs. If you don't have a goal, you're just flying in circles. You're just going through the motions, but there's no forward movement because there's nowhere that you're going, because there's no strategy that you're following. There's no, here's our next step. Here's how we're one step closer to our end goal. Here's the measurable goal that we're meeting that indicates that we're closer to our end goal, right? So people trust people with strategies. That's why strategies are so important. They show up in different ways when it comes to ERG programs. For instance, here's three. There's more, but these are like the three basic ones that every single ERG program is going to touch no matter what industry. Step one is your launch strategy or your relaunch strategy. If you already have an ERG program, you would need a relaunch strategy. The goal there, the destination, keep in mind, because every strategy has to have an end destination, an end goal. The goal would be to get your ERG program in a place where it's now ready just to follow like a program strategy, I guess, essentially. So let's go back to the plane analogy and we'll bring it full circle. So in this case, if you're doing a launch strategy, you want to get the plane in the air. So it's at cruising altitude, right? That's what the launch strategy is. If you're having to relaunch your program, which, people do, that means that you have to get the plane back to the airport and then get it in the air towards the right destination, right? So when it comes to launching, I talk a lot in the ERG movement model, that infancy stage, that's basically all about the pre-launch, all about the work that needs to be done before you launch your program to the members, right? There's a ton of work that's been skipped over time and time again. All of that is what's part of this launch, relaunch piece. There's literally a whole article, a whole blog post that talks about your ERG relaunch plan, right? So that's a strategy in itself. How do we get this plane in the air on track to the right destination? That's what that's all about. In this case, with the ERG program, how do we launch it to the members? And now the members the executives, the ERG leaders all know where we're going with the ERG program. They have clarity. And the best part about reaching cruising altitude when you're on a plane is that part where like the pilot says like, oh, you can take off your seatbelt. That's a sign of like, okay, we're comfortable now. We've gotten through the rocky part of like getting in the air. Now we can, you can chill out a little bit. You can just go through the movements, do what you do. Same thing with the ERG program. Once it reaches that launch piece, that's really when, okay, you all know what your role is, and now you're just executing on it. We're going through the storming phase. Yes, maybe that's like the turbulence piece of this illustration that we're not there in this conversation, but in general, point is once you get to that launch period, people, they feel confident, they feel comfortable, right? So that's one of the main strategies that come up. Additionally, there's a program strategy. That would be, now that you're at this cruise altitude, the path that you're taking to reach your destination. You're not, just that in-between time between reaching that altitude and actually landing the plane. What does that mean for ERG program strategies? That is, after you launch the program, what are the milestones that are going to exist that's going to take you from where your program is at launching to actually reaching this point of development, ERG maturity? I want to give you all a huge hack here. The ERG movement model was designed to be an outline for your ERG program strategy. Your program strategy is really going to map out how you're going to get through the adolescence phase. The adolescence phase consists of early adolescence, mid-adolescence, late adolescence, and then you go into maturity. Maturity is not the simple end goal. That's like, it's not like you reach maturity and that's the end, but there are some other things that happen in the maturity phase as well. So you're outlining through these phases, what are some milestones that we're going to meet? What's the timeline that's going to get us there? We'll talk a little bit in a second about the actual components of a strategy, but in general, just know like that's what makes up a program strategy. How are we going to get to this fully fledged ERG program that's scaled, that's automated, that's all the things? It doesn't go to 0 to 100. And please, especially where we're at in the ERG space right now, and once again, for those of you who don't know me, just know I have talked to so many people in the ERG space. It's the same problems over and over and over again. And at the same time, I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I'm going through this development model myself, following the advice that business development gurus, not even just gurus, but like people who are the best in the business world space. Like, it's the same concept. So I'm following these things perfectly. And just know I'm not experiencing a lot of the same problems that's being experienced. And I want you all to also be at this cruising altitude space where you can also like woosah a little bit, Anyway, that's just kind of why I do what I do, but I know definitely with having a clear strategy, it makes it a lot easier. So anyway, annual strategies, that's the third one. So you have a program strategy, that's like the high level. This is a multi-year plan on how we're going to get from point A to point B. Now the annual strategies, those are almost like the milestones pieces that we're talking about earlier. So for instance, typically every year, you're probably expected to have some sort of update on your program strategy, or at least outline of what you're trying to accomplish this year, some program OKRs. That is more so what that annual strategy is. What is this like next big rock that we're trying to hit? What do you need to accomplish this year that's going to get you closer to your goal? It's not an end all be all, and a year is not that long of a time, especially in the ERG space where you're working with volunteers, but it's going to get you closer. So people are going to be able to read this strategy. They'll be able to also read it along with the program strategy that you created and say, okay, I understand the breakdown of these smaller things that we're going to do this year that are going to bring us closer to that end goal. Hoping that makes sense. Once again, I'm trying to make sure that I can't really see the LinkedIn streaming piece, but in a second, I'll bring it to Q&A, well, at the end of this session. So anyway, next piece. So what are the components of a strategy? Couple things here. Just know, and I kind of just said this too, everyone who reads your strategy, they should be able to read it and understand what the destination is and how you're going to get there. We're not overcomplicating this at all. Just think of like, I'm not going to go into that, but yeah, they should be able to understand how you're getting there, whoever they are and however they interact with the ERG program. So let's just say as executives, they should know at what points they're really going to be activated within this program strategy. The other business units, they should be able to read your strategy if they're interested in it, because let's just say they're interested in working with your ERG program, and you might current state, it might be one of two things happening. Either you try to kind of force this relationship with this but with this business unit that may not necessarily be ready for partnership, or not even them, but even the ERG program might not really be ready for a formalized partnership yet, but we might try to force it a little bit, and maybe it experiences limited success, but ultimately it would come with a lot more success if we had just a little bit more clarity of roles, just all the things that we talk about in the ERG movement. So that's one thing that might happen. Or option two, we might just tell them, oh, our ERG program isn't ready for that, but we will be down the line. And when you give that down the line piece, that's not clearly giving people an understanding of the when, which can be discouraging for the other business units. So they might feel like, okay, well, this is never going to happen, or there's just isn't a dead set expectation for when it would happen. So what your ERG program strategy is going to do, and we're talking about that second one that we talked about earlier, the one that takes you from cruising altitude all the way to landing the plane, essentially. So this is going to tell the business units, in this phase of our development, we are not at a place where we're ready to start working with business units. However, we are expected to reach the late adolescence phase where we're starting to interact with other business units in Q2 of 2024, for instance. So I would love to revisit this conversation, maybe late Q1 or early Q1 2024, something like that. That type of conversation is completely different than just saying, we'll touch on it later, things like that. People will know, especially when you think about executive sponsors who are really leading these business units that we want to partner with, them having knowledge on when you expect to activate their unit. That is a complete game changer. That gives them clarity on, okay, now I can give my teams, the leaders of my teams, a heads up that, this is coming down the pipeline. Even more so when you think about ERG programs, a lot of the time we have a timeline in our head of when we want to work with a team, but or even just ERG leaders in general. But when we go to approach these teams, they might be like, look, we already have our whole year planned out. We don't have time to take on this extra project. And that can be disheartening for us or for ERG leaders, but that's why if we have it in the program strategy, it takes out that disappointment, that disheartening feeling that can honestly lead to burnout, because it almost feels like you're flying with no destination. It's like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But no, now I know exactly how long this should take. So going back to it, what are the components of a strategy? First thing, every single strategy should include some sort of executive outline at the top. This is a smaller piece, but it is important, especially if you, not even if, but when you do pass this on to executives and people who might just skim it, because it's one thing to have a strategy, but really making it consumable for others is the big thing as well. It is not going to bring an impact as much as you would like it to if it's overcomplicated. So even just being able to simplify it at the top, that TLDR piece, that's a really good thing to have in every single strategy. After that, that's where you want to spend time on the context. So what's involved in context? Problem statements. Where's our ERG program at? Why is the ERG program needed? Outlining the vision. What's our vision? That's really this piece. Outlining the vision. What are the problem statements? Providing some prior context, especially if you're relaunching the program. Some people might be like, we already had a program strategy. What's the difference? So really outlining, this is what didn't work with the last program strategy. So all of this context, prior things that people need to know. This way, if this is their first time or looking at this program strategy, they're going to understand. They're going to be aligned with what's happening. So that means, once again, whatever happened in the past, short summary should be here. After you have the context piece, that's where you go into solutions and implementation. Solutions is more so, that's saying, what are some things that we're implementing into this program, or even, let's just make it simpler. What are those big rocks that we're trying to reach in the program that are going to be the opposite of the problem statement that we mentioned at the beginning? So for instance, if one of the problems is like, people from underrepresented communities here have voice that they don't feel connected to each other. One of these solutions might be, okay, so we're going to focus in the early adolescent stage about focusing on building connection between underrepresented communities at this company. That's what we're going to focus on in this section. And that's going to correlate on a timeline to this year or even like these 2 months. But honestly, I would probably do it on a year by year basis in your program strategy. So for instance, last year, an ERG program that I worked with, their focus was simply on improving the reach of the ERG program in general. That was the goal, because the ERG program wasn't known about. A lot of people didn't know about it. So focusing solely that year on increasing the reach was one thing. So what are those things outlined in your ERG program strategy? What's going to be the focus of the year? And how is that going to get you closer to that end goal? Right? Once again, you have to have that vision mapped out. And the reason why this is kind of vague is because for each company, that end goal is different. It's way different. So when you work backwards to explain how you're going to get there, it's going to look different. But these are the components of the strategy that are going to make up how to get there. So context, solution and implementation. Once again, that also includes a timeline. You can have some visuals in there as well, just to make it really visibly clear, consumable for people, just really easy to say, okay, this is where we're at. And then probably a what's next piece, or that's more so around where are we at now, because this program strategy, although it may evolve over time, as your program also evolves, some things might change, but in general, people need to know, like, okay, what are these smaller tactical things that are happening in this phase? So if we are just worried about increasing the program's reach, for instance, if that is our focus of the year, what am I doing? How do I contribute to this? So you have to get more granular, and that's more so where that annual strategy comes in. What are the small OKRs for this quarter that are going to bring us closer to increasing our program's reach? That is going to be the piece where people are saying, okay, I see my part that I play in this. Not just, they have to trust the overall vision. They have to say, yes, I'm aligned with going to this destination, but now they have to understand the plan on, like, okay, this is how I'm contributing to us getting to this destination. That's the buy-in piece that a lot of ERG programs are also currently missing. And when you lose buy-in, or even just when you don't have buy-in from the ERG leaders, that's also something that can result in program chaos, if you will, where people are doing their own things, they're getting burnt out at rapid rates, you're not aligned with everything that's happening with the ERGs. Like, it can really truly be disarray in some cases. So you want buy-in so that people trust the process. The systematized approach to trusting the process, it's really a game changer here. And then just a small thing, every single ERG program strategy should include some frequently asked questions or some sort of like appendix section at the bottom that'll provide some additional context around like just anything that people might have. So one, I would actually invite people to comment on your ERG program strategy and give some feedback in general. But if you are noticing people saying the same things or asking the same questions, you can create that appendix at the bottom, or just any type of additional context. So for instance, if you are following the ERG movement and you're using the ERG movement model, maybe like linking to something that discusses that a little bit more is an appendix, where if people want additional context, this is where they go. I think that makes sense. I think I'm over talking that section, but having that is another important thing in terms of getting that buy-in, because people say, wow, this is really thought out. I could see that they've really taken a lot of time to understand all the angles of this. So that's something else that can help to increase that buy-in. So you have a strategy now, but people aren't following it. Why could that be? One is that they don't trust your strategy. And a lot of the time, especially with ERG programs that are going through or who may know that they need to go through a relaunch process, there might be already that trust lost, right? Where you're like, they don't feel like you're going to help them to get to that destination. That can be a hard thing to come back from, but that's really what the ERG plan, relaunch plan, that whole article that we provided on that gives full context on how to do it. Even for a lot of people who are just coming into a company, that needs an ERG revamp, refresh, this is a great thing to follow to regain that trust. This way, you're not putting out this strategy and everyone's feeling like it's not going to work. Maybe because the company already hired someone to come in and do this work and it didn't happen. It didn't come through. So there's a reasonable, I can see why a lot of people would lose trust in the past, especially as an ERG leader who's constantly going through these change management processes with no real results. So definitely, I keep plugging the ERG relaunch plan. It's like a free article, and it's everything I've done to refresh ERG programs in under 90 days and really get that buy-in along the way. And a strategy is part of it, but it gives context there too. So you have to establish trust. You have to have clarity. I keep saying, make it consumable for people to understand. If it's overcomplicated, it's going to be that much harder to get the buy-in. So simplify it. Paint the vision. Here's how we're going to get here. It's literally that simple. Let's go back to that. For us as program managers, we need to understand all the details, but for ERG leaders and things like that, we don't have to overcomplicate the process. Make it simple for them to understand. Here's the journey on how we're going to get to this end destination. Honestly, I think that we've all been really making strategies since we were like kids. Honestly, I know at least like with Dora, think about Dora the Explorer, for instance. That's like the master strategy creator, right? I don't know if that's everyone's childhood here, but there was the map. There was the 3 obstacles that were, on the way to the destination, but literally just use that almost as a template. Here is where we're trying to go. Here are the 3 milestones milestones that are going to be along the way that we're going to have to overcome. And here's how we're going to do it. It's that simple. So I say it's that simple, but I don't mean it in a way that's like insulting. I mean it in a way like, let's rethink how we're approaching ERG program strategies, right? Okay, cool. And then what's missing currently in your ERG program strategy? Or maybe not what's missing in the strategy, but maybe what context might be missing that will help to also add that buy-in. So 1, SOPs and structure. If people don't know what their role is, they're not going to know, especially what their role is in progressing forward the vision. So if your ERG program doesn't have a clear leadership structure that has an outline SOP that explains to people what they should do in their role, what is expected of them, then they're not going to know how that applies to your ERG program progressing forward. A lot of ERG programs are really operating in this space where it's, everyone contributes where they can, it's informal, it's really grassroots. And yes, that's probably been working for you up until now. But if you want to take your ERG program to the next level, and when I say that, it sounds like if you want to, make your ERG leaders work harder, that's not at all what that means when I say take your ERG program to the next level. It's actually probably going to be even easier because they're going to have a focused thing that they are supposed to accomplish. That's a lot easier than just saying I contribute where I need to. And most of the time, 1 or 2 people end up doing most of the work themselves. So anyway, structure and SOPs, that type of context is what's going to help them to have that buy-in to your overall vision. Another piece of supplementary information that you need to have is metrics. I'm really big on the data. I just did something with Lola from EQI Mindset. Definitely check her out. And I think the recording is coming out soon on our YouTube channel. But with that, I was talking all about just the basics of a data dashboard and what you need to create one of those. And I guarantee everyone here can do that. I am not an analytics expert by any means, a Google Sheets expert or any type of expert there, but I learned how to create these dashboards, and I want more of us to get on that train of having analytics. Back to this plane analogy, it's okay, you have a vision now, but if you don't have data and metrics, you have no gauges. You have no gauges at all that tell you how close you are, what's the timeline on when you're going to get there, are you even on track to getting to your destination? Your data is that, those are the gauges. Ultimately, you don't even have a compass, essentially. So that is what the data piece is all around. People also, they're motivated by data. So once again, this is part of that, providing the trust, the clarity, once they see, okay, now let me restart that sentence. In some cases, without data, it may feel like the ERG leaders are just doing work and there's been very little to no progress, or even like, oh, let's use like a common example. We're hosting these events, but we're not increasing our engagement. Or, it's the same people or something like that. Things like that come up a lot. Or even in Slack, we're not getting much engagement. What does that mean though? Because maybe your engagement increased by a certain percentage and you just didn't see it because you're not measuring it. Or even more so, now that you are measuring it, now you can test things out and see how that impacts your engagement. That changes things completely versus just testing things out, throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks, which a lot of people are doing now. I actually hate that that's one of the phrases that's so common in the ERG space, because no, you need to view it more so as an experiment than as throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. Those are two different things. Anyway, like I said, ERG movement, forward process. We're not focusing on the past. We're just doing things better. So yeah, success metrics are important. And the last thing, which I kind of mentioned in there too, is the timeline. When are we projected to reach this goal? That it has to be incorporated in your program strategies. You can't just feel like you're flying in circles. There's no end in sight. We've been on this plane forever, but we're not making any progress. Having a timeline helps people to have realistic expectations on when you're going to reach something. Especially, for instance, this comes up a lot when it comes to executive sponsors. They may have high expectations of the ERG program, which unfortunately, there's most of the time unrealistic in terms of what the ERG program is about, but maybe they want this business impact for their business unit immediately. And you're like, whoa, slow down. According to the timeline, we're going to get there, early next year, but we have to accomplish XYZ first. We have to build the community first for us to be able to have this community that's going to have this business impact. That's rule number 2 of the ERG movement, by the way. So yes, and here's the timeline on when we're going to be ready for this. Timelines, huge game changer. I've had to have these conversations with executives before, and it really helps to get everyone just on the same page, to easily slow people down. Maybe even it's the ERG leaders who are so eager to start making things happen. It's like, whoa, let's focus first on this. But the timeline does say we're going to get there. I'm not just stalling you, and one day, it may happen or it may not. So timeline is the last piece there.